It was already late, and the house had that quiet, the kind that only shows up around Christmas. Not silence exactly, more like everything had decided to soften at the same time. The tree lights were still on in the living room, casting that dim, warm glow across the walls. The heater hummed low in the background. Somewhere outside, a car passed, tires brushing over cold pavement. I was sitting on the couch, half watching something I wasn't really paying attention to, when I noticed something small. One of the ornaments on the tree was moving, just slightly. Not swinging like it had been touched, not enough for it to be obvious, just turning, slowly. I remember thinking it was probably the air vent. That had to be it. I even glanced up toward the ceiling like I could somehow see the airflow. But the other ornaments weren't moving, just that one. And I don't know why, but I kept watching it longer than I should have, because something about it felt deliberate. I didn't think much of it at first, or at least I told myself I didn't. It was Christmas Eve. My parents were out of town visiting relatives, and I stayed back because of work. I'd done this before, spent holidays alone. It wasn't unusual. The house was familiar. Every creak, every shadow, every little sound it made at night, I knew all of it. Or I thought I did. I got up eventually, turned the TV off, and stood there for a second just looking at the tree. The ornament had stopped moving. It was just still, exactly like the others. I remember feeling a little stupid for staring at it. I even laughed quietly to myself, like I needed to prove there was nothing strange about it. Then I turned off the lights and went upstairs. My room was at the end of the hallway, same as always, same view of the street outside, same old dresser with the slightly crooked top drawer. Nothing had changed. That's what I kept telling myself. I got into bed, scrolled on my phone for a while, and eventually turned off the light. The house settled the way it always did. Soft ticks in the walls, the faint hum of electricity, that distant, almost unnoticeable vibration of everything being still. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I remember is waking up without knowing why. No sound, no movement, just that sudden awareness, like my body had decided something was off before my mind caught up. I stayed still, staring at the ceiling, waiting, listening. Nothing. I almost rolled over to go back to sleep when I heard it. A soft sound from downstairs. Not loud, not sharp, just something shifting, like fabric brushing against something, or something lightly tapping against wood. I told myself it was probably the tree again. Maybe the vent kicked on. Maybe I hadn't noticed it earlier. There had to be an explanation. I lay there for a while trying to convince myself of that. Then it happened again. A little clearer this time. Not random, not mechanical. It sounded uneven, like something adjusting itself. I sat up slowly, heart beating just a little faster. Not panic, just alert. The kind of feeling you get when you think you heard your name, but you're not sure. I didn't want to overreact, so I waited, counted a few seconds, then swung my legs off the bed and stood up. The hallway was darker than usual. I hadn't left any lights on downstairs, so the only illumination came from the faint glow of the tree. It barely reached the top of the stairs. I stood there for a moment, just looking down. Nothing moved, nothing changed, and that's when I felt it. That quiet, uncomfortable awareness, like someone else was there. Not in a dramatic way, not like I could see anything, just that subtle shift in how the space felt, like the house wasn't empty no more. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was Christmas. I was alone. That was it. Still, I started down the stairs, slowly. Each step felt louder than it should have. The wood creaked under my weight, and for some reason I found myself pausing after each one, listening, waiting for something to respond. But nothing did. When I reached the bottom, the living room came into view. The tree lights were still on. Everything looked normal. The couch, the coffee table, the rug, exactly where they should be. I exhaled, a little relieved, took a few steps forward, and then I noticed it again. The same ornament, moving. But this time, it wasn't subtle. It was swaying gently, side to side. Not enough to look like it had been pushed, just enough that it couldn't be ignored. And the others was still, completely still. I walked closer, trying to see if maybe there was a draft I hadn't noticed. I even held my hand out like I could feel the air moving. Nothing. The room was still, too still. I leaned in slightly, watching the ornament, and for a second, just a second, it felt like it stopped because I was looking at it. That thought didn't make sense, so I pushed it away, reached out, and touched it. It was cold, colder than it should have been, like it had been sitting in a different temperature than the rest of the room. I pulled my hand back instinctively, and the ornament stilled perfectly. I stood there for a long moment, trying to process something that didn't have a clear explanation. Then I heard it, behind me, a soft step. Not loud, not exaggerated, just the faintest shift of weight on the floor. I froze. Every part of me wanted to turn around immediately, but I didn't, because if I turned around and there was nothing there, I didn't know if that would be better or worse. I told myself it was the house settling. Old wood, temperature changes, normal things. I repeated that in my head like it was something I could hold on to. Then I turned around, slowly. The room behind me was empty, exactly as it should be. No movement, no shadows out of place, nothing. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. And that's when something small caught my attention. The front door. It was locked. I always lock it, but the chain was unlatched. I remember staring at it, trying to recall if I had done that earlier, maybe when I brought groceries in. Maybe I forgot. That had to be it. There was no other explanation. Still, I walked over and slid the chain back into place. This time, I made sure it clicked. I even tugged on the door lightly, just to confirm. Secure. Locked. Normal. Everything was normal. That's what I told myself as I turned off the tree lights and went back upstairs. I didn't sleep much after that. Every small sound felt amplified. Every shift in the house felt intentional. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke up again to a faint glow in my room. Not bright, just enough to notice. I sat up, disoriented, trying to figure out where it was coming from. And then I realized the hallway light was on, a soft yellow light spilling under my door. I knew I hadn't left it on, I was sure of it. Still, I got up, walked to the door, and paused, because there was something else. A sound. Not movement this time, not footsteps, just breathing. Faint, slow, on the other side of the door. I stood there completely still, trying to convince myself I was imagining it, that it was my own breathing reflected back somehow, that it was the heater, the pipes, anything. But it didn't match. It was too steady, too separate from me. I didn't want to open the door, but I also couldn't stand there forever, so I reached for the handle and turned it. Slowly. The door opened with a soft creak. The hallway was empty. The light was on. Everything looked normal. And the breathing was gone. Just like that. I stepped out, checking both directions. Nothing. No one. No movement. I walked down the hall, checking each room, bathroom, closet, guest room, all empty, exactly as they should be. When I got to the top of the stairs, I stopped because I could see the living room again and the tree. The lights were on. I know I turned them off. I stood there for a long time, just looking at it, not moving, not thinking, just trying to understand. Then, slowly, one of the ornaments began to turn. I didn't go downstairs that time. I just stood there until the lights started to feel too bright, until the space felt too occupied. Eventually, I backed away, closed my bedroom door, locked it, and stayed there until morning. When the sun came up, everything looked different, brighter, normal, safe. I went downstairs carefully, almost expecting something to be out of place, but everything was exactly where it should be. The tree, the ornaments, the door, locked, chain in place, like nothing had ever happened. I told myself it was just exhaustion, maybe stress, maybe my mind filling in gaps. That's what made sense. That's what I needed it to be. But then I noticed something. Small, easy to miss. One of the ornaments was hanging slightly low.